In this video, join me as I complete the color phase for a professional comic book cover illustration. In this case, this is an episode of Star Atlas Core, and I'm trying to give this a retro science fiction poster style vibe. You can see the finished version behind me, and I'm just going to walk you through how I would take a set of finished lines and work it all the way up to this. We're going to talk about color theory, composition, and also how you massage and get those final little bits of detail. We're going to go deep into some of the elements of the line and color process, how to get nice textures, etc., and look at how easy it is using the line and color process to add a high level of polish to a simple, humble line drawing. As usual for a Drawing Codex video, this is going to be neither fast-paced nor heavily edited. This is a real-time hangout drawing tutorial thing, but you are going to see how this is actually done, and as you hang out with me, you can learn a few tips about professional illustration and composition and cover design, etc. So hopefully that sounds interesting. Hopefully you'll join me. Let's jump in and get started. Alright, welcome to the Drawing Codex. My name is Tim McBurney. I've been a professional working artist for over 20 years, and on this channel, we're all about drawing cool stuff from our imagination, embracing the challenge of drawing, and mastering the craft of line and color illustration. Now, if you'd like to learn more about line and color illustration, the same style that I create all my comics and illustrations in, you can check out my free Quick Start Guide. It's aimed to get you up and running quickly in Photoshop, developing your own simple, reliable line and color process. It's free. The link will be in the description. Go check it out. All right, time to do the color. Now, first step here is just going to be going through the motions of separating out all the different elements that I've drawn onto separate layers. So what I'm actually going to do is get rid of the titles, and I'm going to try and find any. Well, firstly, what we can also do is just collapse down all of this stuff because we don't need that. And I'm going to make the line sepia using my actions in Photoshop. And I'm also going to delete and get rid of any layers here that don't actually have anything on them. Although I think for the most part, pretty much all of these do. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 layers just for a simple cover with 2 characters. I'm going to start in the foreground because that's a really good way to do it. I'm going to hit W. We are going to select this. I'm going to turn contiguous on. I want a tolerance here of 0. And let's try that again. Boom. There we go. All right. I hit Q. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I've basically isolated by selecting what is not the lines, i.e. the white space. All the lines were closed. Q for quick mask. And then I just hit this action, which is going to create a bunch of these sepia lines, then compress them into, right, and we'll start filling this with gray. It just does this auto thing. Same thing here, except these will be a little bit trickier. I'm then going to go Shift B for my pencil, and I'm just using a flat round brush. Right. And this is where it's good to start from the foreground, because once I've got all that done, I can now kind of see where everything is. Oh. Cool. Hit the action again. And yeah, I just have that action bound to a keyboard shortcut. It's Shift F4 for me. I also have Control F4, Shift Control F4, like everything is kind of bound pretty like intensely when it comes to those different keyboard shortcuts. If you have a Stream Deck, an Elgato Stream Deck or some kind of other thing, that can actually also be a really good option in terms of just storing actions and making sure you don't use them accidentally hitting the wrong one. All right, so we've got this character. Oh. Easy. So if you spend a little bit more time on... Right, just going to hide that. Yeah, if you spend a little bit more time on... Oh, that is super annoying. There is some little Photoshop thing that moves the selection there that you've got to kind of turn off. Yeah, so if you spend a little bit more time on the lines, everything becomes pretty easy at the flatting stage. Right. Boom. See, I'm just collapsing down. Go through. What do we got here? Got the little cube. This is, right, again, Q. Done. So yeah, this is a process that would take you quite a bit of time otherwise. Now, again, oh, that's pretty good. Whereas now, because I've done all that work, this is pretty easy. And again, it should be pretty easy here too. Maybe there's going to be a couple of these that are opened, but yeah. Oh, so again, this is hard to, I guess, get it clear how important this is, but like, this is the leverage that you have with the line and color process using Photoshop, using these selection tools. I now have a really, really good pixel level selection on a lot of complex stuff. You know, it's kind of actually hard to get that with a lot of other art styles. So, you know, we spent a lot of time messing around. We have this weird coloring book style where everything is there. This one will be a little bit more tricky, and it can feel like, why am I doing this? Right? You know, like, what is the benefit here? And it's really simple. Once you get to this phase, it's all downhill in terms of handling a couple of key elements that are really challenging to work with on many art styles, such as getting clean edges, having everything on separate layers. Right now, a lot of the structural elements are just handled for me. All right, so here again, I was sort of talking about this. We'll have to think about how exactly and where exactly a lot of these lines are going, and I will have the ability to tweak this later. As in, I can maybe feather some of those edges with the color, and I'm just going to close that so that I can test this. That looks good. Oh, that's escaping somewhere. Boom, boom. So yeah, like getting a nice clean shape here, having it match to all the lines is like pretty challenging. You know, if you try and do this, yeah, if you try and do this with other art styles, this bit of it is a lot harder. Boom, boom. All right, close this. So yeah, this, I'm gonna delete some of those little bits and pieces. Yeah. All right, so here, let's rotate so that we're, all right, I can line it up with the side of the UI. Just make sure that my kind of movement lines are roughly in line with that verticality. And what I can also do is, right, kind of get a lot of these characters here. And let's actually put the full stack on. Let's put all these layers back on. This will give me a better understanding of, right, what I'm painting under. Ooh. Now, this bit is kind of important because, like, I don't want to get any weird tangents with the character. So I've kind of put some there already, like kind of behind the Brocco character. So we'll have to manage these, see what happens. But I think for the most part, up here, these are, like, I'm just going to fill this in, I reckon. And again, I can do the opposite as well. I can cut into it, creating an interesting amount of movement there. I can also then try and maybe make it feel a little bit more organic. Right, again, I could try and do a similar thing here. Yeah, I think again we'll probably see. This is like a little bit dangerous, right? You can mess up here. This is not all downhill and easy. But yeah, I think that will work out. All right, so again, same thing. Hit my action button. There we go. Now I've got this. Actually, I think I can probably do this guy and just continue as I have. So with this one, so here you can see I've got some of those lines are getting selected that I was talking about, the zigzag lines, because I didn't properly lift. But yeah, here, with this, right, we just need to go under, right, because we're not going anywhere else. So yeah, so there we can see, boom, that's done. And yeah, this is very much abstract design, right? Trying to balance out. Yeah, so I kind of want to / need to fill this in. Just because I think otherwise I'm going to get some weird tangents around his silhouette. So I kind of want to fill in, I think, the majority of his silhouette. And also if we think about the main actual like big kind of beam is actually sort of in the middle here. So yeah, the more that I look at this, the more I'm like, you know what? Let's just make all of this. Yeah, like I think something like that would be good. So again, we're always able to kind of make that up, as I said, like kind of play around with it with the color phase. Yeah, probably this all should be filled in as well. Now that I look at it, now that I think about it. All right, let's try that anyway. Again, with a lot of this stuff, it's just experimental. But again, we'll hit that. I got the shape. What do we got? Last one is this one. Again, I'm just going to use this method. Again. All right. So we got to select, then hide it, then do Q. Otherwise, it may not work. So again, these are super big, super rough shapes that we put in, and right, they shouldn't take a lot of effort to flat or put in, etc. All right, boom, same thing. Let's hit that. Okay, now I am going to make the background here very dark because it's space. And yeah, so we're about sort of 12 minutes in, 14 minutes in, probably. Again, this is a 10-minute process max. Let's use this, but I'm going to take off the black that I put on there. So now we've got like a pretty good approximation of what's going on. At this point, you can save. You could certainly do a, save as, because at this point, if you're struggling computer-wise, this has been done quite high res. The lines have been done quite high resolution. If we look at how high res they are, 9,500 pixels high. I do not need it to be this high res to print. This could be essentially 300 dpi. What I normally do is actually leave it at 470. But for these covers, because my desktop can handle it, I just don't really resize it down. It means the file sizes get to about 2 gigabytes, and at the end, they kind of are pretty slow. So if at this point, now that you've used the large pixels, or the large quantity of pixels and fidelity to do some really good selections, you can easily res it down. So if you want to save as here, you've still got this file, you've still got the high res lines and the high res flats. This is a really good place to do that. Let's just make sure. Did I? Oh no, yeah, that's there. So yeah, this is a good time to step out, save, res down. Now, the reason for that, and I'm just going to double click on this concept a tiny bit because it's worth going into, is like, if you look at how many pixels there are here and how possible it is for me to utilize the sophistication of the edge, because there's so many pixels there across that line, even though that line's like tiny, because I'm doing it at such high resolution, there's such fidelity there. It's very easy for Photoshop to make a selection and then finesse the selection. So a lot of what's happening is we're going select, modify, and then we're doing like something like contract, maybe expand, we'll see. So this is by like 2, right? So again, it's very easy to kind of just shift it in, right? Modify, expand by like 1 pixel, right? So again, I have a lot of fidelity there. I can move it again, right? Select, modify, expand, 1 pixel, right? And then that moves it in. So I've got so much room there to play with. And again, if that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. But if you understand that the problems that we often have with selections, I've got so much room and fidelity here to play with this. As soon as I res that down, there becomes far less pixels. So when I kind of step in 1 pixel, it goes a lot further, right? It's going to really sort of step in here. So basically the TLDR is just that doing your flats and getting the silhouettes of the different objects that are going to be on different planes, different objects also that may be animated, right? So if you kind of look at like what may be a consideration, right? I've got this character, right? Now I can move this character around. You could have them on a separate layer. That's all defined. It's defined pixel perfectly. Very, very easy. Now, as soon as, again, and the higher resolution you do that at, the better. But you can resize down. Again, just unpacking that because it may be a concern. Okay, so let me look at what my value structure was. And I will also open up a few flats that I can utilize. So this is where, again, also the line and color process becomes quite effective, because I can utilize past flats and flat colors to help me. So one of the things you'll notice here with the way that I work is I actually have these lines as groups. And these are still uncompressed or unflattened groups with lines in them. So what this means is that here, right, I basically flatten this onto a white layer. This means that it's very small. Again, you could compress this file, res this file down. It's not, I don't have a whole bunch of layers, but I still have all of these lines as, right, where are we? Right, I still have all of these lines as their actual kind of original lines here. And that is useful. Again, if you don't care why, probably doesn't matter. But I keep them all in a group there. You could also, as you save here, res down, keep these live and unpacked in your original file, and then again, you've always got them. You just never know when you might want those original lines. Again, why? Yeah, don't worry about it. You just may at one point want them. So here, I'm going to use the background that I normally use for the space. And here, what I'm going to do is just see if I can put this in roughly to kind of get a feel for what's happening here. So again, this is rough. This may be all I need though. I may not need to go much more detailed than this. We will see. But again, this just gives me a pretty, like a good understanding of what the whole thing's going to be. And this is just good for like prototyping. So I'm always after trying to figure out like, okay, what color is everything going to be? How is this going to work? What is going on here? What color will this be? I don't know. Maybe kind of sci-fi blue. It could be an even stronger version of the pink, right? We'll see. No idea. I am going to pick. Right, let's go here. Again, this is where I was saying like some of these asteroids in the background, right? Like we could even make them darker than the surrounding sky. Right? So they're going to feel like very much in the background. Got asteroids here. Right? They're going to be like that. Like that. All right. Yeah, I mean, so we need to brighten up the planet and the yeah, so again, this is how I tend to work. I'm looking at the graphic nature of it, and I just find it's really good to, yeah, kind of get that working earlier on. Yeah, like I feel like that looks kind of cool. That's a little bit more like the thumbnail. Now again, I will tweak this, but for me, often when I'm sitting here going through this, right, I kind of want this to be a little bit more in the background. I'm going to leave it like that. We'll see. Yeah, so even though, like, yeah, we'll kind of figure it out later, you know, I'm always good. I think it's always good to, like, check the actual thumbnail I had. Make sure that, you know, this is not straying too far from that. And then just kind of get everything sort of looking right. Because then I have more confidence. Like, okay, I kind of see where this is going. So what I'm going to do now is say, like, look, this kind of looks okay to me. The next stage is flattening in all of the characters, because that's probably the next key bit. So, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I still have so many settings here that I need to destroy for this version of Photoshop. So all the docking and stuff. All right, so pretty simple here. I've got these on this panel. I can zoom up pretty well. And yeah, now I'm just going to zoom up on my flats that I've got for these characters. Right. And yeah, let's go. So yeah, got to kind of think about what goes where, like which sequence do I do this in. Now, this is actually a pretty simple design to flat, because I often begin the flatting with, like when I design the characters, I do it with this type of base in mind. What that means is that, you know, I'm working with this base color that all the characters are. And then I'm just kind of adding stuff to it. So it kind of means that it's pretty easy to progress through this, because most of the character is actually one type of color. Boom, boom. Right. Got knee pads. Now, here's where it's probably better to slow down and do it right. Because if you kind of rush this bit, you can have to go back in there and zoom up and redo stuff. So I'm often creating these loops or circles that are going to be easy for me to fill. And then I'm filling them in with the paint bucket tool, which is should also be set to tolerance 0. All right. Let's zoom in and do this with a bit more fidelity. You can see when we actually zoom up, got a lot of gaps everywhere. All right. I'm just rotating this so it's a little bit easier for me to see where I'm drawing. but this is actually all outside, so I can really just, oh, should be able to just kind of fill that. Yeah. Boom. Boom. And again, these are all very similar colors. You know, sometimes I would play around with, you know, making some of them very different, but, you know, there is a simplicity to this art style, right, that is worth sticking to, where, you know, we just kind of make just make things pretty graphic. You know, if you look at really old comics, often they did crazy things with the color. You know, just making whole people the same fluoro pink or whatever. It was like, hey, look, if it's got color, it's better than if it doesn't have color, right? Just make sure it's got color. Boom. Oh, I forgot to erase that little bit behind there. So again, that's pretty easy to do. All right, just gonna put a mask on there, hit that. So yeah, this also will go like pretty quickly. Let's see if I can increase the... Right, put those lips on. Here, let's do the eyes. And is that pretty much done? Yeah, again, pretty simple design. What could be good? Let's get this, select that cape, right? And I'm going to select a slightly cooler sort of shadow color. So again, I'm not adding any actual shadows to the style, but you know, sometimes it's good to, and I could do this here, right? Even with this hair, we could get the hair. Again, let's take that, select it. Just add a slight Control H for hide. Right, just add a slight little shadow in a couple of places, right? This will add a bit more production value to it, right? Like it's not going to make any real difference to it feeling a particular way, but yeah, it's going to feel now like, oh, there's something there, there's something going on. All right, I think that's done. Let's get Brocco now. So he has, right, this, and again, these capes are things they don't have in that other, I mentioned that in the beginning. These are not, right, capes that they have as part of the designs in the comic, yet it is kind of important. All right, so this stuff is all that kind of darker color. And again, I'm going to do things like, if you look here, this is another like very small point, but you know, if I leave the underside of this, like the side of this, as either the darker metal color or the lighter metal color, and just put this on the top, it means I get a little bit of dimensionality for free. All right, boom. Okay. So again, doing it this way is maybe not the most sort of efficient or, super clean, but one of the things it does do is it allows you to kind of be pretty loose, which I think is useful. So, it means I'm not having to go crazy zooming up, making sure everything is 100% accurate. Because I'm just kind of doing this in the right sequence. So there's no like ugly colors kind of sticking out. It's very challenging to, teach that. You have to kind of be doing a lot of this to really figure out how this stuff works for you. A lot of it is based on exactly what your line work feels like, what it looks like, etc. Damn, I forgot to put in his little things. I'm just going to do them with color. That's annoying. I think this is also red. Let's make that red. Boom. All right. And I think we're going to have his little patterns for his suit here. And I think from memory, this might be a hand or something. I forget whether he has. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just make him have a glove on. Okay. Yeah, and like this is pretty rough, right? Like this treatment here, but that's fine. They're all dark. That's good. I could probably, put, we could probably put this color here if I wanted to get fancy, but honestly, it's not that important. Same thing here. Let's put these in. All right, same thing here. I'm going to reduce the opacity of that so that this is a little bit lighter. Let's select this. All right, there we go. And I have a feeling that this thing should be different color. And yeah, I think that's pretty much done. I noticed there's a little bit of kind of weirdness here. Let's see if we can cut this out. And the good thing also about this is like you can always go back and tweak this. Like there is no point at which you couldn't, as long as you keep everything, all your layers live and we're not flattening anything down. Like I can leave this and it can even be like half done. And what you often find is like yeah, sometimes I'll go through and I'll realize, oh, you know what, this was like too messy, you know, like this just did not actually work. And other times, you know, you kind of finish the whole thing off and it'll be like, yeah, you know, I needed to go and fix that. It's often just really hard to tell. Okay, so the rocks that they're standing on are not. Let's see if I can get some shadows for rocks. I probably don't need to. I can probably just go with what I've got. And I can probably just go with this same flatting brush. So let's just work systematically. Background. I'm going to select a background layer. So I'm going to select a dark color. I'm going to set it to a low opacity. And I'm just going to go over all of these and I'm going to try and be somewhat like careful in the way that I do it, which hasn't fully panned out there, but like that's probably good enough. Same thing here. Like what do I actually got here? Right. So the reason for that is if I go over it twice, it's going to build up. So yeah, let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's zoom in. And yeah, just go through. The reason for this is going to step down the shadows in a pretty common way. So it'll look pretty consistent. What else we got? These ones. So I'm just thinking about this as if this is more or less kind of traditional, right? Like I got one shot at it. I'm just going to go through, add some shadows. Boom. All right. What next? Done this one. Done this one. What color is the cube? Let's see if making it pink works. Fine. All right. What do we got here? Oh, now I lost my color I was using as a. Oh no, I still got it. All right. So now I'm actually just going to select that, go up to full opacity. This will be a little bit cleaner. So now that I've got the color, because this is a little bit more complicated, I'm going to be on here for a while. It's worth me actually figuring out what this color is. I've selected it. Now I'm just painting on it with 100% opacity. This way I can carve back in, I can carve out. Again, it's possible to do this with overlay layers, you know, hard light, blending modes. I am just finding the color and then we are painting it on pretty roughly. But yeah, here I can select this, I can select that. Right, I can be a little bit more painterly with it. Boom. Right, we'll put some shadowy sort of stuff underneath the characters, right? You know, as if they are sitting in shadow, which they probably are. Again, where's the shadow coming from? That's not the type of art style that we're dealing with here. Light is coming from above, roughly. This is a fairly low impact shadow, so you know it doesn't really. It's the lighting there is iconic and symbolic. It's symbolizing and being an icon of what lighting should be. It's not trying to be realistic. And here, I'm like, I think I probably have to go. I've got to run some errands, so I'm going to take another break in 1 minute. Boom. I'm just going to see if I can finish this. This also gives you, again, really good step-by-step things to do where you can be like, I'll just get to the next stage. Like, I'll just one more asteroid, one more layer. Let me flat one more layer. Right? And yeah, so what have I think that's most of it. So yeah, starting to come together. Cool. Let's take that break and I'll come back and keep adding shadows to asteroids. Okay, let's see if we can finish this thing off. I'm going to keep flatting and see if I can double down on this. Now here we got a couple of different elements and I'm going to hit contiguous. See if we can make these Control H to hide. See if I can make these the same kind of color. I will be able to adjust them a little bit with overlays. So it doesn't really matter if they're all the same here because we're just dealing with those initial local color flattings. I noticed there was a couple of bits here where that could, all right, control, all right, like that all needs to be pink, and I think also this all needs to be pink. Now again, these pinks are the same. I'm gonna deal with that soon. But now that I've kind of got everything in there, and as I said, the overall image is kind of working, or at least I feel like I've got it to a good stage. The next stage is to go in here and clean this up. But initially, it wasn't really clear to me which bits kind of needed to be more free-flowing and just kind of what it would all look like. Whereas now that I've got the rest of the image in there, a lot of these more subtle decisions are slightly easier for me to make. So sometimes it's not clear how you're going to modify and actually make some of these subtle details work until you're actually kind of looking at it. And still, if I kind of look at the time here, I still reckon this is probably only going to take me, you know, a couple of minutes to go through and just clean up a little bit. Now, I'm also going to see whether I can just add some of the pink core stuff to some of these other floating elements. All right, so I've got a couple of other little bits and pieces. The question is like, can I add a bit of this to some of these, just giving it a bit more dimensionality. And it can be good here to just hide everything, right? Like this way. But you notice for in Photoshop again, I hid by hitting Alt, click on the eye for the lines, because if I do that, I will also show the flats because the lines are linked to it. It's all these little time-saving things that you kind of can only learn through a lot of trial and error. Boom. All right, just going through. Now, there'll probably be a fair amount of, I guess, what we could call texture and additional build up on top of this. And probably we kind of won't always be able to see all these little details, right? Like sometimes it's just not going to matter that much. But it's good to get the basics sorted. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Now, what I can do here that I think could be good is just like adding an extra layer where this, we can imagine this is like, here's where I'm actually seeing like the core of the planet. Right. And again, I can use this to kind of help me tell this story of kind of exploding energy. Right. I can use this. Boom. So probably good to, yeah, now that I can see what is behind here, I think this one becomes a little bit easier to kind of put this in. So yeah, hide some of it sometimes. Other times we need to see the whole thing. Right. Oh, I'm kind of ruining my own work here. It's all right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, is there going to be more of this? Maybe. So yeah, just pushing some of this acceleration. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of working pretty well. All right. Now, if we go up here, I've got these ones, and if you recall, I didn't finish these off. Now, these are going to be a little bit different because part of the lore here is that some of the sort of debris are these other planets. So there is the major Iris planet in the middle, but part of the cataclysm is these other planets that have been drawn into the cataclysmic event. And so there's a lot of like additional planet that is kind of broken up here. And this is kind of what I'm demonstrating. So there's like asteroids, I guess, that are a little bit more part of the imaginary world that the characters are part of, right? So this is where often the idea of creating these like little overlapping worlds, I think is really interesting with these covers. You often see this with like classic movie posters, classic sort of retro movie posters, where, you know, it's this kind of overlaying of different scenes from the movie, different ideas from the movie. Some are actually little scenes that really existed. Others are maybe far more abstract, far more made up. And I think it's often like the mix of these that really makes a difference. So here again, good to get a feel for like what I'm actually painting. So that is to say, I guess like a really simple way of thinking about it is like this scene that's happening behind with the planets is not really in the same space, right? They're separate physical spaces and scenes, and a lot of them are abstract. So this is obviously not happening behind them. Like they are sort of standing on an asteroid thing, which doesn't make any sense. And I think even like someone sort of commented was like, oh, there's sort of wind in space. Now, I think this is a really important thing to pay attention to because certainly, like, yes, there are certain characteristics of space, and none of them are really being adhered to very strongly here. And it's important to figure out and understand where your fiction and your imagery sits. Because, again, firstly, they're not really, it's not really a realistic scene, it's a cover. Secondly, a lot of stuff in science fiction doesn't make sense. Most of it doesn't make sense. Gravity in spaceships doesn't make sense. You're imagining that someone has figured out a whole bunch of this, like propulsion in most spaceships. Again, in most science fiction doesn't make sense. I feel like I made a whole video on that. Talking about spaceship design, like most of it is nonsense. Like that's fine. Like that's kind of cool. That's the whole game. So a lot of it is like, well, yeah, like that's why you have lightsabers and people wearing magician's robes, and why that's compelling, because again, the story is not real. Like it's, again, this seems really interesting or really obvious, but if you're into sort of fiction and you're trying to figure this out for yourself, like if you're doing hard science fiction, it would not be very visually interesting, right? And that would be a very different thing, So this is a comic based on a video game, and a lot of this is based on some scientific ideas about futuristic environments, but it's assuming a lot happens, right? It's assuming that you solve the gravity in space kind of problem with spaceships, that you have artificial gravity. The whole idea of having a space docking station where there's like a force field on it. The whole idea of sort of propulsion. Most of it is nonsense, right? That's fine. Like that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes people inspired. Now, should I have this as? Should these things here be? Like, no, I feel like these should be, a bit more in this range of shadow. Right. And even though that's, that seems kind of petty or whatever, I mean that in the best way possible. That, like, if you are trying to create something that is visually interesting, you have to look at the constraints you've got, and like, exactly where does my project sit in hard science fiction versus space opera, and how far can I push it visually? If you look at something like Dune, for instance, one of the things that has made that such an evocative story that so many people have wanted to visually tell is just how magical a lot of it is, right? It's sort of talking about particular sort of semi-science fiction ideas that are pushed so far that, again, they're almost like magic. And because of that, there is this sort of mysticism to it. There's a mysticism to the way the Dune novels are written. But yeah, if you have the ability to make something that is more space opera-y, you kind of have to take it, right? Like, if you're kind of trying to stick too closely to reality, then you probably have to look at how your narrative structures are going to function, and what makes that kind of story work and not work. And basically, like, you kind of have to push it as far as it can go. which is why, again, there's often atmosphere in space, you know, because actual kind of space with hard shadows is like very hard for us to conceive of, right? That's why we often still have atmosphere. We play up the nebulas in space. You know, we as concept artists, we try and make it as evocative and as romantic as possible. And if you want to try and make something that's more sort of hard sci-fi, go ahead and see whether people are interested. Because in many cases, what people are interested in is the romance and the fantasy of it, because a lot of these science fiction stories are talking about humans and human problems. You know, no one who really likes Star Wars thinks that Star Wars is real or plausible, or that that's actually, you know, some kind of Heinlein or Clarke style science fiction. You know, we like it because of what it says about, you know, oppressive totalitarian regimes and standing up to that, and what it means to be a hero and think about who you are as like a young individual. That's why people care about it. They don't care that, you know, it's all nonsense. Because again, it's basically a fantasy story. It's a space opera. Again, hopefully that should be obvious. But I do know that for me, a lot of time for me was wasted worrying about like hard science fiction problems in a space operatic dramatic structure. And again, stories are dramatic. They have to exist in a dramatic structure, right? If you make it realistic, it's in most cases going to be boring. That's obviously different if the hard science fiction creates genuine challenges, right? So, you know, if you read something like, you know, something like Ben Bova's like Mars or something like that, you know, or his other sort of science fiction, that it is often dealing with like the specific way that he thinks or perceives that people would actually move out from Earth, and how it would be a lot of companies and corporations that kind of did this, and how that would kind of function. And, you know, it's very interesting to see a story where you have human characters dealing and struggling against hard limits of science fiction. And to imagine what that would actually be like, because that's very interesting when it is sort of bound to reality a little bit more. But again, you're going to have, you know, I don't think anyone's made that into a movie because it would probably be kind of boring, right? Again, they have made a lot of science fiction series that are kind of, I guess, inspired by that you can see on sort of Netflix or whatever. But yeah, that you kind of have to figure out how to make it visually interesting enough. Anyway, I think that's worth going into, because often we hold back as artists when it comes to making stuff look as interesting as possible. And that's actually often our number one job, is to make things look as interesting as possible. Let me know whether you agree or disagree in the comments down below. These are some of the things that I've kind of had to come to terms with, right? Because yeah, as soon as you realize like how much of science fiction that you grew up with as a kid is just complete freaking nonsense, you're like, oh, okay, right. It's going to be very different going to Mars. All right, so I'm going to see if I can create a bit of texture in the background here. I'm going to select that dark background color. I'm going to make it a bit darker, a bit more saturated. All right, this gives me this kind of darkish kind of thing, and I'm going to create a bit of sort of texture here. And this is going to firstly just give me a bit more contrast. All right, give me a bit more depth. Boom. Nice. All right. Next, pretty much what I've got is just airbrush. I'm just going to use some very simple gradients. So I will select the airbrush. Is that it? Yeah. And yeah, we can kind of look at, again, smoothing this out a little bit. Again, these gradients help a lot with sophistication when it comes to color grading. Yeah, all right, I think that's a bit better. So here, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to basically make a new layer above every set of flats. And then we'll also make a layer above basically every probably don't need one there. We need one there. All right. And what I'm going to do is, right, I've got these in the background. As I said, like, let's push them back, right? I'm going to push these big asteroids that are over here, and I'm going to push them back into the darkness. Maybe I'll leave right that there a little bit. So again, you can, to me, this is worth sort of pointing out. Again, we can kind of see them in the background. They're creating visual interest, but they're sort of being sublimated. And the other thing I can do that I'll probably play around with later is thinking about, yeah, like how maybe we use some sort of gradients over the top to kind of make everything sort of pink. I'm still not sure what color this should be, right? Whether it should be the sort of pink color or maybe slightly more kind of purple, whether it should be kind of darker or lighter. And the other thing that I'm not entirely sure about is, like, is this actually, oh, let's leave that there. Like, is this actually above or below this, right? Like, this could be, yeah, no, I think it's got to be behind. All right, so here again, what I'm going to do is play around with the gradients. Probably drawing a little bit too much attention to that. Let's see. All right, so here again, let's think about, making this a little bit more purplish in color. And this as well, right? So I just kind of had that purple in, right? It was kind of just hanging around. It was in my hand, and I was like, actually, that kind of looks pretty cool. Now, one of the things I can also do is turn on my preview to kind of see exactly where that is going to cut off. That could be useful for me. But yeah, so this again is like really pushing it back into space, as you can kind of see. And I can also then maybe think about pushing it even further into space. We could even go further by, let's see what's in gamut. That's all out of gamut. Does it matter? Is it going to get printed? It's a digital comic, maybe. Is it all out of gamut? Yeah. All right. That's so good. So one of the things, again, that I think is really interesting, this is a total rabbit hole sort of topic, is like, I genuinely think that the future of a lot of this kind of stuff, like comics, is digital. Because, like, I can push the colors and create stuff that you just can't in print. If I kind of do it as a as a digital, right? Like if you were to view this on an iPad, like an OLED iPad Pro, it looks so good. Like the colors are so vibrant. You just cannot get this any other way. But obviously none of these will sort of print well. So what we can do is we can probably take some of the magentas, and a good way to kind of think about it is like, okay, if I do the, okay, you can see it's all out of gamut. And again, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, like that's totally cool. If you are, this is where like the actual kind of print stuff is kind of important, right? So like how far do we need to push it in order to get it out of gamut? It just seems like it's very very out of gamut. Again, it's probably just so saturated. Is that? Yeah, so it's probably because here these things are out of gamut. So I might be better off. Like, is that out of gamut? Like, pretty much. So again, here I can just take the, again, can we take some, might not matter if it's out of gamut. Might just, it might convert okay. It's hard to say. But certainly these like bright kind of colors, again, don't, right? They don't tend to print well, right? It's probably going to look a little bit like that. So again, that's the gamut preview. This is showing me which colors are out of gamut. Cool. All right. And yeah, it's probably not making a huge difference. I kind of like that though, like a little bit more sort of pushed back might be good. A little bit cooler anyway, a little bit less hot. Let's see. Again, the good aspect of this particular art style is, as I keep saying, that you can like keep going crazy. Right, so we can kind of almost make, and here you can see again, like we really start to see the separation of those different spaces, right? Like now it really starts to feel a little bit different. Here, I'm going to take this same color I've got, but let's make it much darker. Or maybe actually I'll take this and make it a lot darker. Actually, I'm going to go all the way. And again, here's where like it's good to go back to your thumbnails and check what's actually kind of happening here. Because my goal is just to create some sense of sort of depth there. And here, let's look at the thing that they're sitting on. Again, like can we add a little bit of a gradient there? So again, just these subtle gradients will make it feel less like some kind of crazy flat kind of dead look. Again, just a little bit, just a tiny little bit will go a long way. And we can tweak the colors for this as we go. All right, starting to come together. I need to put some simple gradients going up this character. I feel like I'm looking at his boots and I feel like I just want to hit them with a bit more of that warmer brown that she has, just because they feel a bit blue. All right, done. Let's go back to airbrush. And all right, again, I'm just gonna run a gradient up the character. I'm gonna do the same for her. Right, run a gradient up the character. Sort of ground them a little bit. And yeah, like, so these are all just me just painting with airbrush, right? Like this is just me with airbrush. Let's see if putting a bit of a gradient over here to kind of indicate there's some sort of shadow there might kind of help. Again, I'm not doing any overlays, fancy stuff. Like there's nothing kind of tricksy going on. Yeah, just doing super basic stuff. All right, so here I've kind of lost my purple, so I'm gonna get it back here. Now this bit at the bottom is kind of gone blue, and I'm like, is that good or should I keep it? Again, this to me is like critical, like new layer. Like should this be purple or not? I feel like it being purple like that works. But again, as you can see, like here we have atmosphere in space or some kind of thing that is diffusing the light here. This makes no sense at all. This is complete and utter nonsense. But, you know, that's fine. All right. So now I've kind of probably done all the things that I can do. What I am going to try and finish this off with, though, is a sense of some... Where are we? I need my... All right, dust particles. So these are the stylistic affectations I've kind of built up for Star Atlas Core. Now, again, I notice a couple of things that probably I want to change kind of straight away. And I'm going to kind of try and make these. So you can see there's a way out of gamut. All right, this is just going to add a little bit to the chaos. And let's try and select some of these darker colors, right, and see whether adding a bit of... I'm just going to pick the darkest color I can find. All right, again, this is just going to add a little bit of something. And I'm erasing it out. I'm thinking about like, subtly, I don't want it to be too chaotic, right? But a little bit is probably good. And again, I often like to do a similar thing with, you know, some of these splatter kind of textures, right? And this is something that I'm painting like above all of the... Let's make this as big as we can. This is one of the reasons why not... So is that all on the same layer? Yeah, this is one of the reasons why that's too much. Big files, as in big resolution files, can be very challenging because, yeah, sometimes the brushes just don't go big enough. All right, so again, that's probably a little bit too much in terms of the texture, but again, it's just adding a little bit. And something you can do also, right, like if I want even more texture, you know, I can just put this down to a very low opacity and kind of hit this everywhere, right? And what this does, even though it's probably better to do that. Have I done that? Yeah, probably better to do that as a second layer. But you can see this is kind of really making it just feel a little bit busier, right? And once I add the paper texture, this will make even more kind of sense. All right, so we can see again, if we sort of zoom up, you probably would need to be watching this, you know, pretty high res on YouTube or pretty high res in video to kind of see a lot of these little subtle changes I'm making. But all I've done is just set the opacity here super low, right? We're just painting on the layer above, and I've got the opacity set to like sort of 10%. It just puts a little bit of that lighter texture on things. Okay. So we can probably do, right, like a similar thing over the top of everything. I could do it just for, right, like we could kind of do this just, let's make this more like, I could do this like just on the layers themselves, so we're not getting this kind of fading out. But here's, I'm just kind of doing this quick and dirty, right, like over the top of everything. Just hitting this a couple of times, and this is going to give me probably way too much texture. And then I'm going to push it back a little bit. And I find this just kind of breaks things up a little bit, right? Again, it moves it away from just being 100% flat. And I'm going to, just make sure we remove that from like the faces and other kind of key focal areas. But, it's just adding a little bit of subtlety here and there. All right, another thing that I think could be good is we got Barocco here. I am going to maybe hook a layer up here. Let's get a big airbrush. And I'm going to kind of contemplate maybe just fading him out a little bit so it's kind of clear that he is right behind her. Right, again, we could kind of do that. So that's like a pretty big change. I'm not sure how well that's actually going to work. We could do the same thing with her. Right, so big airbrush, and we're just kind of fading out to the right. Again, this is kind of blending them back into the background to a small degree. And again, we can totally add a little bit of that to their character as well, right? Like sort of you could just fade them in a little bit more, but again, just pushing things a tiny bit for them. And what I'm going to do now is, right, just a little bit of the same on everything else. So we're just going to go like a touch. Let's get some sort of purple there. Right, go over the top of everything. So I've kind of, what I'm doing is I'm pushing it down. We're homogenizing it a little bit. We're losing a lot of the contrast. So you've got to be really careful with this kind of pass. Like often I'll do this and then I'll actually kind of want to take it back. But what we can try now is looking at adding some extra contrast. So now that I've sort of got that, I can contemplate, pushing some of that contrast back. Right? And there's many ways you can do that. So this is kind of just levels, right? And you can see it's kind of pumping the color everywhere. Like that's kind of okay. You can see here that this is really starting to pick up some of the weird color. And I think this is like asteroids. Where is this? I think this is like above. This is like these ones. Yeah, there. All right. So I'm going to hook this. I'm going to get our big airbrush. I'm going to get that color again. Now in Photoshop, you can just undo, and that puts us there. And here, I'm just going to go through. Right. Actually, I might do that. Yeah, just pushing these back a little bit. So I'm doing that over the top of the lines. Just very subtle sort of difference. Now, this is where you can easily notice like, oh yeah, I forgot some stuff. Okay, so I've sort of forgotten this pink up here, right? And it really does, now that that's not there, I can really see, oh yeah, that's kind of, these kind of seem like they don't fit anymore. But that's right. We can go in, put this here. Boom. All right. Okay. So we're back up here. Now, again, I probably pushed the colors a fair bit. That's okay. We can always pull colors down. I think that's like something that's always sort of possible to do. What I can try and do now, though, is just experiment with some sort of global color adjustment. So again, I can put more magenta in. Like we can make this more purple, right? Do we want it to be more purple, more blue? Right, like a little bit more purple, maybe good. Like, yeah, I mean, what I often like to do with these is give them like a strong color, because often that identifies the covers a little bit, right? So if we sort of compare it against some other, see if I can just bring those up so you can kind of see against some other kind of covers. I'll just open this for a minute because it's another huge file. It's gonna really heavily push this computer. But yeah, so again, I feel like this is often good, is to kind of compare it against something else. I'll see whether I can get a JPEG to compare this to. So, you know, you can kind of really see, again, here's like probably a better sort of representation of the iris planet. This is also for sure not in gamut, right? That whole thing is like not in gamut. Yeah, it's also gonna be majorly pushed. Just waiting for that to load, but yeah, so it can be really good here to, yeah, just kind of make sure like this cover is like obviously different to this one, because they're often kind of variants essentially. All right. So what I can try and do though is punch up this purple. All right, so I'm gonna figure out like where in the world is this, and you can kind of see like it's not really making those that much more purple, because I think a lot of this, right, is actually still living there. Right, I'm gonna have to close this. This is just way too big. Let's see if I can open up that same image from a while ago. Just find it. If I can't find it, here we go. Boom, there we go. All right. So there you can see again, like that's got that sort of vibrancy that I kind of want. And here is another one. So, you know, this is kind of what I'm after in terms of color vibrancy and color distinctiveness. I like the fact that this is really purple, right? But also I want to make it so it's, you know, a different kind of purple to this. So again, what I'm trying to do there, right, let's reset that. See if I can find those magentas. And play around with things. Get some, these might actually be whites. There we go. That's kind of what I'm after. Yeah, like could we make it super purple? All right, now let's do color range. I'll see whether I can just grab some of these bits, which again, it's not quite working. There we go. Right, so there we're kind of picking up some of those and really sort of punching those colors. Now, as you can see, like this is all going to be out of gamut. All out of gamut. It's all going to get disappeared if it prints. But again, I can always do a print grade. And what we can also do here, there's a couple of ways you can do this. I can just erase off this mask, right? And I do not want the history brush. I want the... Right? I can basically say, like, let's not have that quite so bright over here. Right? Let's tweak and adjust exactly where that really kind of appears. Like I can even kind of say, let's not have it be. So I'm often, the trick I'm trying to do is have it not be too bright around the periphery, so we kind of still pull the focus in. And what I can then do is, like, maybe I could select that and let's make another selective color. In this case, yeah, let's see if we can find the neutrals. Right, I can push it even further, which again is like, to me, is a really cool, like how far you can push it. If you were just working digitally, like you can make this day glow. Like a lot of this probably won't even make it past the compression of YouTube. It's kind of so colorful and bright and crazy. But yeah, that's, to me, is kind of part of the fun of, yeah, it's pretty cool. Or I think so anyway. You let me know. Yeah, I think, again, it's got a cool sort of purple cosmic vibe. All right. So again, now that I've kind of pumped up that color, like I could, you know, pull all the colors down a little bit, you know, and just make it feel a lot more subtle. And then if you can see sort of what is in and out of gamut, right? Again, this has put a few more things into gamut. It's still not going to really save us. But yeah, that often is something I do as well, right? Is like just kind of desaturate stuff and just pull. Right, let's pull the saturation and the focus like just back to the main characters and the main kind of focal areas. Right. Cool. And yeah, it's still not too late to go back and mess around, right? So here, one of the things I kind of notice is like, like this is quite, like this pink back here is like a little bit separate to the planet exploding, right? So like just separating that out a little bit, to me, feels like it could make sense. That's making that feel very soft though. But again, just like doing it in a little bit might be what we need. Who knows? So yeah, this is often what I'm going to try and do, is just kind of push and pull, see if we can get things working. And this is all about subtlety. And often what I do is, you know, I'll kind of do the actual kind of work here, and then I'll come back to it a little bit later, right? We'll sort of keep coming back to it. All right, so again, there's often another trick that I find works quite well. We just use a simple kind of blocked color grade. And then we can also kind of use a dark color grade to kind of pull focus towards the center a little bit. You know, that can also work, you know, if you've got quite a complicated image. Again, we've always got to remember, like, this is probably actually what we're going to see. So yeah, just always keep that in mind, right? But yeah, I mean, I feel like this is probably pretty close to kind of what I wanted. Another trick that I find is quite useful is we'll sort of copy paste the whole thing, and I kind of remembered this little cube. I think we got to do something different with the cube, right? Let's at least create some different dimensionality for it. Boom. All right. And maybe, boom, just a little bit of a glow or something. That's not right. Boom. All right. Now let's do a Shift Control C. Control V is going to copy the whole thing. Now what I'm going to do is do a filter blur, motion blur. Let's make it vertical. Oh. And again, let's zoom up. So you can see this is like really starting to chug, right? Right, let's make it pretty significant. And what I'm going to do is just put a mask on there that's inverted. And you can see this gives me back my clean look, which is probably what I want. And I'm just going to go around the periphery. Right, there we go, and kind of blur out some of this stuff. Right? Especially in that kind of background. Right, I just kind of want that behind, right, behind the logo to feel far less crisp. So again, just very sort of simple, subtle technique. Now, the last thing that I probably do is take the textures that are in a separate file, and I'll drag them over. Because again, like this, I'm not quite sure exactly how big this is now, but it is pretty big. Just gonna do sort of save as and see how long and how big this is. And again, how big it is compared to how it was. So it was when we kind of started this about 266 megabytes. It's now 1.77 gigabytes. So once you kind of do that, you either need to res the file down or you need to have a lot of RAM, right? Like kind of more than 128 gigabytes of RAM or something. Okay, so here I've got the texture, right, in its own file. Now this is instantly, right? So this is the sort of paper texture that I sort of use, and it's just something I sort of drag on. Right, we could probably, now that we've got this, add some extra levels as well. Right, like, yeah, let's just compress, just crunch things a little bit. And something you can also do is, right, I can actually, this is a cool trick, is let's just make those affect the luminosity. Right, so those levels are just picking up the brightness a little bit. All right. Other things we could kind of do is, and this will probably, all right, let's take the texture off, but let's try and I'm going to make a grade that's slightly more blue. Right, like slightly like that, which I think I kind of like anyway. It's a little bit, right, it's a little bit brighter. Let's see if I can dupe that. And with this one, I'm going to do select color range, and I'm just going to see if I can hit the top here of these. Let's pull this, the fuzziness way down. Right, so hopefully, yeah, it's going to start picking up like just the tops of these. Can I get it to pick this up? Maybe. What if I do minus that? Okay, again, without, it's very purple. Here, I feel like, yeah, I've got like a slightly... All right, we're kind of just cleaning them up a little bit. Again, these are things that may, like these, some of these are like very subtle and they may not survive the process of compression on YouTube. So again, we're still kind of pretty, all right, like this is where again, you can go back and dial some stuff back. I'm like, maybe that's a little bit too faded out on Brooker's thing, right? I could maybe go back and erase some of that. Although again, some of this is on the layer above, on the blurred layer. Like I do realize that. But yeah, again, just making tweaks. Boom. All right. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of pretty close. If we sort of put the texture on, starting to get some good separation. Again, it's like very sort of purple. I do really wish I could kind of get, right? Like I wish I could kind of get these, get this. So I'm going to try and get that. But let's deselect the characters. Let's deselect this. I think that'll be good. Now, let's see if we can create a just levels. Like, can we just punch this up? Yeah, that's what I wanted. I don't know what that's going to do to the color gamut or anything like that, but yeah, interesting. What happened? You know, that's about right. Yeah, so again, that's pulling in a few little bits and pieces. And often it is, it's only, right, I could maybe try do the same for this. Like, let's find these colors. Now let's deselect all the stuff on top of it. So here I'm doing a color grade, right, on top of everything, because sometimes it's hard to do it on the bottom. Right, let's get rid of everything. I think that's going to do it for me. And again, let's do levels. Oh man, this computer is not happy, right? So see, now that I'm here, I can like push it up. Yeah. So it's a little bit kind of messy. And again, this one, right, a little bit kind of graphic here, but yeah, just punching that I think is good. And yeah, if I wanted to try and do that even more, I often like doing these as layers, right? So let's see if we can hit this again, right? Like really kind of punch it up. But for this one, I'm gonna just seeing what it's actually doing there. Right, I'm gonna try and make sure this only kind of affects the center. So again, just kind of adding a little bit more sort of graphic punch. Right, let's again pull that away a little bit. Don't want it to be too extreme. So you notice this is a PSB file. Let's save this and see how ridiculously huge the file size is. But often if I'm wanting to like preserve these as like big printable posters, you know, I often try and sort of push through the the pain of kind of working. Yeah, so we're at 2.5 gig now. And that's about where it becomes really sort of painful to work on. You know, like it's still fine. You can still move around. You can still do everything. Like it's perfectly functional. From my experience, Photoshop is much better at dealing with these things than Clip Studio, Procreate. There's no way like an iPad or Procreate would ever be able to handle any sort of file size this big with this many layers, this much texture, you know, actually sort of render it, be able to kind of add all these things. Yeah, it'd be total non-starter. Yeah, all right, last thing. So here I have this, and I think what I might do is, we'll see, but maybe I could make these kind of pink. This can often be like a good, right? Or just these ones, maybe. That's kind of what I did there. Yeah, it just makes it a bit better. So yeah, I think I'll probably leave it there. I feel like I could probably, like when I come back to this, I might do a few more little tweaks. And they're probably going to be things related to like the level trades. Probably where I'm going to want to say, let's make this darker. But I'm only going to make that affect the luminosity so I don't, you know, make things too saturated. And you can see that's still going to make stuff like quite dark. But then what I can do is just see whether I can, you know, make this pick up some of these darker areas, right? I think with like a lot of the texture that I've got here, this is probably going to get a little bit busy. But yeah, this is sort of a way where I could maybe, you know, add a little bit more sort of contrast, a little bit more drama. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think that does look pretty good. What I need to do is then go hue saturation on that and pull the saturation down. And you could even, just I wonder whether that would even be better as opposed to the selective color. Yeah, so that's doing So again, I'm often just like messing around, right? Like mess around, find out, see what happens, see what's happening. Right? Like is that too much? Way out of gamut. But that's right. Yeah. But yeah, I think maybe we need that level of contrast there for this one to work. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there, I think. Again, I know I kind of often keep saying this. And then, this is often the reality, right? Like I keep finding little things to do. Like for instance, I feel like here, right? I feel like this just looks a little bit kind of static. And then I'm thinking, well, what could I do? All right, maybe I could add a few little bits of much more graphic. Kind of texture here. Let's make this feel a little bit less like, oh, it's got airbrush glowing over it. So this is an overlay layer. Again, maybe something like this would be cool. See if I can hit. All right, can we kind of erase? Again, just trying to make it feel a little bit more organic. Yeah, I don't know whether that's really working, but I think let's set to lower opacity. That might be better. Again, I feel like this idea of having these kind of power lines that are sort of mirroring the stuff that's going behind it kind of makes sense. Oh man, that's so annoying. Yeah, I think it's got to be like that. All right, I'm just going to keep fiddling with this forever if I don't let it go. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this kind of matches the level of sort of vibrancy that we have here. It's a little bit more dull, but it's also just fundamentally a slightly simpler image, right? I feel like this is a much more impactful image. Yeah, so I think I'm probably going to leave it there. We could kind of play around with it, but I think it kind of works, and that really is the name of the game with a lot of these covers. So, again, we spent probably about an hour in this kind of session, and probably about 20 or 30 minutes of it was kind of unnecessary. It was kind of done. But that's often what, doing these kind of covers is like, right? So right now, we can kind of see if we kind of zoom up, one of the benefits of that kind of line and color technique is, I got a fairly sophisticated image here. It's high res. I've got overlaid texture. I've got noise. Got a sort of faux paper, sort of traditional kind of overlay. Got a lot of cool stuff happening, and it creates like quite a sophisticated surface to the image, right? So if you kind of print this, it'll kind of print it pretty well. As we said, we're kind of about there. So if I kind of copy that and we sort of say, let's do 300 dpi, and then I will paste that back in. And now if we look at our centimeters or inches, again, I'm at 80 centimeters high, which is like 31 inches high at 300 dpi. So, you know, like that's a pretty big kind of canvas now, and that'll sort of print fine. So again, it's sometimes worthwhile preserving those files and kind of keeping them really kind of high res. I actually don't want to do that. Yeah, so again, that's all I got for this one. Yeah, finished kind of cover. If we kind of zoom up, we can slowly pan around it as our computer melts down. And yeah, there's still a good opportunity, you know, if we want to kind of change any of the colors, to change the colors, tweak things. But yeah, that's how I would create a cover, especially with this kind of poster style design with the line and color style. So there you go, all done. That's what we've got time for in this particular video, in this particular tutorial. Let me know what you got out of this one, whether you got some good tips and techniques for the line and color process or cover design. Let me know what you thought of this way of breaking up this real-time fully iterated tutorial. I broke this up into the construction phase in part 1, the finish lines or inking in part 2, and here in the color. I'll do a bunch more of these, probably of some more covers, because that's kind of what I'm working on this year, and also some pages and interior stuff. I also know a lot of people are really keen on more traditional kind of sketching or drawing sessions, so I'll do some more of those as well. But hopefully you can see through this the power of using digital tools for something like the line and color process. For me, any other way, it's really quite hard to get this level of a finished illustration kind of completed in that kind of time frame, and again, also have it be able to be printed quite large. So anyway, I really like working this way. It feels very creative, and yeah, even though traditional drawing is fun, it's really hard to beat this kind of process for production when you're on deadline and you've actually got to get stuff done. Now, if you want to see me tackle the thumbnailing and ideation phase, which I didn't cover in this particular tutorial series, check out this video. It's part 1 of 2 where I tackle the 20 thumbnail challenge. So if you haven't already, check that one out. And yeah, other than that, catch you around. Happy drawing.